Hello, everybody, and welcome to our week 3 of legal and ethical issues. This is our third week in this class, and I hope that you are having a good time. I hope that you are enjoying the class, and I hope that you are finding some of these theories and concepts useful. Very well. So, for this week, we have also some interesting concepts and theories and ideas that we are going to discuss. For this presentation, I promise to not make it so long, but I also want to make sure that we cover a few important concepts and also talk a little bit about your deliverables for this week. So let's get started. Alrighty, so for our readings, we have two chapters for this week. We have chapter 5, which is codifying duty and ethical perspectives. By the way, some people would say codifying, others would say codifying, so whichever you want. So codifying duty and ethical perspectives, and this is all about the professional codes of ethics, right? Think about the doctors, right? Doctors that take the Hippocratic Oath, or public servants, like a president, for example. When a president is sworn in, he or she, hopefully she one day, um, is sworn in and has to state the oath, right? Has uh, to follow and to adhere to an oath. And that oath, by the way, which, by the way, a curious note here, if you look at the Constitution, if you read your Constitution, Article 2 talks about the executive branch and the president, and talks all about the president, right? And the president shall be sworn into office, the day, the time, and shall perform this oath. But if you read your Constitution, you curiously will not find the words "So help me God" in that oath, and um, and that's interesting, because in every single time since that oath has been repeated by a president, um, those words "So help me God" have been included in there, and that just goes to show you that our nation has been a nation that has been founded in a religion, in a religious um, tradition of a God, right? Of God. We are Christians. We believe in God, the Father, and of course Jesus Christ. But if you are from a different religion, then you might have different beliefs. But whatever the case may be, we believe in a higher power, and this is included and incorporated in the Constitution when a president takes office. So that's interesting. Okay, so the codes of ethics, which public administrators usually have to abide by and follow, are very important. Like I said, if you are a public servant, you abide by a code. You have to take an oath. Every single U.S. officer has to take an oath of office to uh, to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign or domestic, etc. And that's part of the code of ethics. Professional codes of ethics include those for engineers, for doctors, for lawyers, right? Um, and so this is very common, right? Very common in practice. So Chapter 5 is all about the code of ethics, codifying duty. What does that mean? Okay, it's kind of like, how do we transfer the theoretical um, ethics into a practical execution of the ethics? So that's all about codes of ethics. Chapter 6 is all about undermining duty. And these are the challenges to ethical behavior. Very, very important study here, because unethical behavior is something very, very common in practice, and especially in public administration and in administration in general. Right? We are challenged by it. We face unethical behavior from individuals, from elected officials, right? Corruption and money laundering and bribes and all of these actions that are considered unethical behavior happen all the time, and they happen everywhere in the world, right? So as public administrators, the challenge to be able to identify, to manage the risks that that unethical behavior produces, and what kind of strategies and legislation, in fact, can be enacted and promoted to deal with unethical behavior so that we keep it at a bare minimum, right? So this is all about unethical behavior. This is chapter 6. All right, and then additional to your readings, you have videos, right? And you have one video that's really, really interesting video. I always like this guy because he's not only very good at expressing the message, at communicating the message and teaching, but the narrator is also he's got a sense of humor. He's got a little funny thing in him, and I always find his videos really interesting and enjoyable. So in this video, he discusses the philosophical principle of ought implies can, and this has all to do with moral responsibility. So, for example, the idea that if you are able to be morally responsible because you have it, it's feasible, you can control it, it's within your reach, it's within your authority, it's within your power, then you should be moral. As long as it's within your, again, within your power, within your reach. Okay? So this is a philosophical principle that should drive our behavior. Here, of course, we are faced with um, the the difference between morally lucky or moral luck versus causal responsibility. And you know, it's all about who do we blame and should we blame certain people for certain actions. In the video, it talks about the accident, right? An accident of two drunk drivers who left the party, and one of them was driving and got home, but the other one, a few minutes later, happened to run into a little girl who crossed the street, and he hit her and killed the little girl, right? The drunk driver. So we necessarily, right, and very, very easily, we as a society tend to place blame on somebody that causes a harm, right? But if you think about these two drivers, they're both equally responsible for their actions. It's just that one got lucky. One of the drivers got lucky. Now, that doesn't mean that we should justify and condone the action, but the action of killing the girl is an unfortunate and tragic result, but the wrong is really the decision to drive drunk in the first place. That's the real wrong. Whatever happened after has to do with luck, with fate, with the the dice, right? You roll the dice, okay, and so, but it nevertheless creates a dilemma. It presents a real dilemma, right? Because as society, as public administrators, as police officers, as judges, right? At some point, we have to make decisions. We have to pass judgment, right? So who is responsible, right? And who bears the responsibility? Of course, it also depends on if the person is, or the object, or the producer of the harm is able to be made responsible, because what we refer to as moral agents, right? What if you have What if a 2-year-old or even a 1-year-old, right? A 1-year-old is a little baby, a little toddler, decides that he or she is going to, toddle around the house and stumbles upon a gun or a rifle, right? And the rifle is loaded, and the child accidentally hits the rifle or causes the rifle to fall down. The rifle goes off and shoots the 3-year-old little brother, right? We've seen this happen. We've heard these tragic events in the news. And so here is the question: is that child responsible for the death of that other human being, his little brother or his little sister, right? And if not, who is responsible, right? So um, is a is a gun the responsible uh, object of a death, or is the owner of the gun? Or you see, so these are questions that are sometimes create challenges and dilemmas as to who is to blame, what is to blame, right? Um, all of this is discussed by the theorist Nagel, Thomas Nagel. Okay, so who presents some of these theoretical perspectives. Okay, so this is all about moral luck versus moral responsibility and causal responsibility, right? That's all in this video. Now, going further is the discussion of justice, right? What is justice, right? You think about justice because, and by the way, um, when you are thinking about justice as you read this week's readings, right, as you go through this week's readings, remember, or you might recall, I should say, the Aristotle, okay, Aristotle ethics, the virtue, virtue ethics, right? Recall utilitarianism, recall um, deontology, Kantian ethics, right? So recall these authors, and John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham, right, the utilitarians, recall them as you consider this week's readings and incorporate some of that gained knowledge into this week's readings. Because when we think about justice, and if you're asking yourself, okay, what is justice? Ask yourself that question for a minute and pause my presentation. What is justice? What does it mean to be justice, to be just? Is it equality? Is it fairness? Right? If you think about equality, what do we mean by equality? Okay, is it equality of outcome or equality of opportunity? Right? You read the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and it talks about the equal protection of the laws, right? That individuals should be equal under the law, so that we don't end up having second-class citizens, right? This was all about, of course, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments were all about the abolition of slavery, the making freed slaves citizens, and then giving the freed slave citizens the right to vote. So 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment, extremely, extremely important amendments, the most important ones, in fact, of the Constitution. But did they ensure justice? Did they really drive justice? And was the result justice for these individuals who were intended to benefit from these amendments? And of course, you can make arguments on both sides, but certainly it's not like freed slaves all of a sudden had everything going on for them and everything was nice and rosy, right? I mean, we had, even after the Civil War, the Reconstruction era was one of the most horrific and bloodiest and unjust eras in American history. And even after that, the late 19th century with Plessy v. Ferguson and Separate but Equal created the whole concept of separate but equal and the Jim Crow laws in the South. Was this justice? right? Was it equality, really? And of course, with Brown versus the Board of Education, 1954, we see that in fact the Supreme Court came to the conclusion that separate could never be equal. It was inherently unequal, and thus it could not be just. That was not justice. And so we've seen these manifestations of justice in our own government, in cases, in Supreme Court landmark decisions, and in legislation. And it when you think about justice, it's so complex and so complicated because justice can be whatever people want it to be, and to coming to terms with and agreeing on what justice is becomes the hardest part in trying to get everybody to agree on something, right? As far as a law or legislation, etc. So, is it equality? Is it fairness, right? And what is fair, right? Who decides what is fair? Okay. Does justice mean getting what we deserve? So, for example, here you folks are taking time and spending money and all of your effort and your dedication and your leadership to try and achieve a great goal, which is to get your master's from California Baptist University. And part of the reason that you're doing this is because you seek to improve yourselves, right? You want to further your careers and you want to become better professionals, and also because it's going to help you become more marketable and perhaps gain promotions, etc. So I mean, there's a compensation element at the end of the road, right? And so you should get what you deserve, right? You should be rewarded for your effort and for your commitment and dedication. So is that fair for somebody that is making $7 an hour when you're making $50 an hour, right? Is that fair, right? Well, certainly it's fair for you, and I would agree that it is fair. After all, you earned it. You put in the time, the effort, the money, the sacrifice, all of the time lost with family and husband and wife and children and parents, right? And all the money that you could have spent on other things, you decided to invest in your education. So of course it's fair, but not everybody thinks so, right? And so when you think about, and you hear this in the news, right? You hear a lot about we deserve this and we deserve that, and you wonder, right, where these folks are coming from. Is justice getting what you need? If you think about other places in the world that have socialist type systems, or systems like, for example, Nicaragua, where I was born and where I lived for several years. It's a system that believes that everybody should have the same of everything. And of course, if you have more because you went to school, or you went to school in the U.S., or you had more opportunities, or you put in the effort, then you are looked down upon, right? And you are in fact persecuted. And in the 1970s, with the revolution, people that had more had their possessions and their land and their property confiscated, because the government, the revolutionary government at the time, thought that these people did not deserve to have these properties, and they didn't need them, and the people, the poor, the masses needed them more than the rich. And so a group decided that they were going to redistribute these properties throughout all of these other individuals. Of course, at the end of the day, 40 years later, those people that needed the properties the most, the masses and the people, they're still without any property. They are still poor and barely surviving. Oddly enough, it was that small group of people that decided that how justice was going to be carried out. They're the ones who ended up with all of these properties, right? So just wanted to share that a little bit about that experience from Nicaragua in the 1970s, right? Okay, so justice, right? Complicated because is it about equality? Is it about fairness? Is it about getting what you deserve, getting what you need? Okay, uh, the theoretical background for these kinds of these arguments. You can find some of these arguments in John Rawlsian theories, and Rawls believed that justice is fairness. Okay, but here again, fairness is such a subjective term because who determines what is fair, right? And one can say, well, fair is a livable wage. Well, a livable wage can be livable for some and not livable for others. Does everybody make that same wage? And the answer is always no, because those that are in positions of power, authority, and control, they end up having uh, the these laws and these policies not include them. It doesn't affect them. They are not included. They cast their decisions and they make their decisions for everybody else, but they are not included. So is that just? Is that fair? Okay. Um, Theorist Robert Nozick, okay, do not level the playing field, right? This is another idea. And, sometimes you think that justice is a level playing field, but is it really justice if you level a playing field where you make everything equal for everybody? Because if you do, then does that mean that folks that are disabled should get the same exact treatment as those that can walk, as those that can talk and hear, right? So, you know, think about it from that perspective, right? There's something called negative rights versus positive rights. For example, a negative right is a right that restricts you or restrains one person or you um, or the government, okay, from doing something, from being able to do something. It limits your actions, okay, versus positive rights, which positive rights provide authority, ownership. They provide that person who has the right with a claim on an asset, a claim on another person or the state. Okay, so these are the negative versus positive rights. Okay, all right. So what's on deck for this week? All right, what's on deck for this week as far as our assignments? By the way, this is the great Derek Sanderson Jeter, baseball shortstop for the New York Yankees. I'm a New York Yankees fan. I know most of you are probably California Angels and Giants and A's, but which by the way, I love the A's and I love the Giants because I spent a lot of time growing up in California in the summers. I used to go spend time with an uncle who was a very good close friend of my family, and he was a baseball fan and he loved the A's, and we used to go to the Oakland Alameda Coliseum at the time, and just whenever the A's were in town, we used to go, and my brother and I used to love it because he'd buy us hot dogs and soda, and anytime the A's had free radio night, and there was I remember we got a radio ball that was a baseball and it had the A's logo and stuff, and so I kind of grew fond of the A's at the time. And I saw Ricky Henderson play for the A's there. Of course, Ricky played for the Yankees too. But I'm a big baseball fan, and I love the Yankees, and I love Derek Jeter, who I had the distinct pleasure of meeting and actually shaking his hand when he visited Virginia Tech during the 2007 unfortunate and tragic events with the shooting at Virginia Tech, and the Yankees came to Virginia Tech to play a game against the Virginia Tech baseball team, and Derek was great. He was just really he's a fantastic person, a great leader, a great human being, and I had the opportunity to shake his hand and meet him, and it was a great time. So what's on deck for this week? All right, so we have a multimedia discussion board. This is due on Saturday. Okay, for this one, very briefly, you are to locate the code of ethics from your profession. So if you are a public administrator, you locate the code of ethics from your institution, your organization, or the government. Okay, or if you're an engineer, or if you're a doctor. Okay, so locate it, and then locate the ethical guidance from a specific faith or church. So if you Baptist, for example, if you're Baptist, Southern Baptist, then locate the ethical guidance from Southern Baptist Church. Or if you're Protestant, or if you are Catholic, or if you are Muslim or Jewish, whatever the case may be, it doesn't matter. And if you don't have a specific faith or church, then locate whichever you want. Okay, one of your choice. Okay, maybe to learn something new. Okay, so locate the code of ethics from your profession. Locate the ethical guidance from a specific faith or church, and then briefly describe the code of ethics for your profession. Okay, so briefly, and then describe any information you found from your religion. All right, so what is interesting? What did you find that was intuitive and especially insightful? And then here's the important part. Do the two ethical frameworks agree or disagree with each other? Okay, and so this is what I'm going to be looking for to see if you answered this one question. And then which theory or theories covered in the videos best apply to the information you located? So this is your multimedia discussion board. Then your written assignment. This one is due Sunday. Okay, for this one, use Rawls, Nozick, and at least one other theory from earlier. Okay, and then develop a thesis of something you want to say on the topic of justice and fairness, and how moral luck may or may not play a role in how society assigns praise or blame. Okay, because remember, society many times will praise those individuals based on the outcome. Okay, this is, and if you think about deontology versus, say, consequentialism, right? Deontology tells us that an act is right or wrong if it's based on duty, right? If it's the right thing to do, then it's right or wrong, no matter how good or bad the consequences are. But we know that society doesn't always do that. They don't always assign praise or blame based on a deontological perspective. Rather, society tends to use a utilitarian or a consequentialist perspective, where if something ends up being a success, then you get praise. If it ends up being a failure, or if something tragic happens, then you get blamed for it. When perhaps the whole idea and spirit and your desire was righteous, you just had a bad outcome, right? So develop a thesis of something you want to say on the topic of justice and fairness, and how moral luck may or may not play a role in how society assigns praise or blame. Okay, remember when you do this, begin the paper with a thesis paragraph to set up the main point, and in doing so, remember that you will need 3 supporting points, themes, to defend your thesis. Okay, so I'm looking for these 3 supporting points or themes that will support your thesis. And then lastly, this is another Zoom week, so invite classmates to participate in a meeting. I'm seeing that you're doing this already, and I'm really, really impressed and happy that you're doing this. Your meetings must include at least 3 people for at least 3 minutes. So 3 for 3, okay? 3 on 3, however you want to call it. You can discuss anything you would like, right? Homework, class, etc. Okay. What I recommend is that you discuss the outline of your papers as a team, because this is going to help you come up with a really interesting, intuitive paper. This is a class that this philosophy and ethics and morals and justice and all. These are really, really dense and deep concepts. And the more you discuss with other people, the more broad and thorough your perspectives and your intuition is going to be, because you're going to learn a lot from your classmates and from these discussions. And then post in the discussion board the day and time of the meeting, who was in the meeting, right? And what in general was discussed. Nothing major, just just kind of a quick update on that. Okay. All right. And last but not least, I want to wish you all a great week. Enjoy this week's readings, assignments. Have a blessed week. Thank you very much again. You're doing a great job so far, and I look forward to reviewing your assignments. God bless, and thank you very much.